Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG46 verification HUD. Notes print. Leave a comment. Verification HUD. HUD makes a strong statement about the importance of verification for FHA appraisals. They state the following in Handbook 4000.1. The appraiser must verify all market and comparable information used in the appraisal, and is accountable for any information presented as fact used to develop the subject property's value estimate. Verification ensures that the information is meaningful and provides the appraiser with a firm understanding of market motivations and trends. During the verification process, it is necessary for the appraiser to gain an understanding of the motivations surrounding the sale in order to determine if the sale was arm's length and not distressed. Understand current market conditions that influence value. The appraiser must verify sale information with the buyer, the seller, or one of their representatives, broker, lender, lawyer, etc. If the sale cannot be verified with someone who has first-hand knowledge of the transaction, use public records. However, the appraiser must clearly state how the sale was verified, and to what extent. End of page. Chapter start. 11%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG47 verification year. Notes print. Leave a comment. Verification year. When utilizing the URAR appraisal form, Fannie Mae Form 1004, Freddie Mac Form 70, dated March 2005, you are asked to provide your data sources and verification sources on 2 lines in the sales grid on page 3. End of page. Chapter start. 11%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG48 verification Fannie Mae. Notes print. Leave a comment. Verification Fannie Mae. This is what Fannie Mae has to say about the subject of verification in their selling guide. B4-1.3-07, Sales Comparison Approach section of the Appraisal Report. Data and verification sources of comparable sales. Data and verification sources for each comparable sale must be reported on the appraisal report form. Examples of data sources include, but are not limited to, a multiple listing service, deed records, tax records, realtors, builders, appraisers' files, and other third-party sources and vendors. The appraiser must state the specific data source, such as tax records or deed records, and refrain from using broad categories, such as public records. Data sources must be reliable sources for the area where the subject property is located. Examples of verification sources include, but are not limited to, the buyer, seller, listing agent, selling agent, and closing documents in certain situations. Regardless of the sources used, there must be sufficient data to understand the conditions of sale, existence of financing concessions, physical characteristics of the subject property, and whether it was an arm's-length transaction. It is acceptable to obtain comparable sales data from parties that have a financial interest in either the sale or financing of the subject property. However, the appraiser must verify the data with a party that does not have a financial interest in the subject transaction. For example, if the real estate agent of the subject property has provided comparable sales data, that information must be verified through another disinterested source. End of page. Chapter start. 11%. 12%. 12%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG49 verification Fannie Mae. Notes print. Leave a comment. Verification Fannie Mae. In section B4-1.3-08 of the selling guide, Fannie Mae states, to meet the requirement that the appraiser utilize one comparable sale from inside the subject subdivision or project, the appraiser may need to rely solely on the builder of the property he or she is appraising, as this data may not yet be available through typical data sources, for example, public records or multiple listing services. In this scenario, it is acceptable for the appraiser to verify the transaction of the comparable sale by viewing a copy of the settlement statement from the builder's file. When providing builder sales from competing projects that are not presently available through traditional data sources, the appraiser must verify the sale from the applicable settlement statement and indicate on the appraisal report that the settlement statement was the document utilized for verification. Additionally, the appraisal must include discussion and analysis of sales concessions and upgrades for the subject property relative to concessions and upgrades for each builder sale. For special appraisal considerations regarding condo projects, see B4-1.4-03, Condo Appraisal Requirements, and B4-2, Project Standards. End of page. Chapter start. 12%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG50 verification, HUD. Notes print. Leave a comment. Verification, HUD. In their handbook 4000.1, HUD makes these statements about verification. The appraiser must verify the characteristics of the transaction, such as sale price, date, seller concessions, conditions of sale, and the characteristics of the comparable property at the time of sale through reliable data sources. The appraiser must verify transactional data via public records and the parties to the transaction, agents, buyers, sellers, mortgagees, or other parties with relevant information. If the sale cannot be verified by a party to the transaction, the appraiser may rely on public records or another verifiable impartial source. MLS records and property site visits alone are not acceptable verification sources. End of page. Chapter start. 12%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG51 organizing the data. Notes print. Leave a comment. Organizing the data. When you've done all of your research, you will have a jumble of notes. The notes are practically useless until you find a way to organize them. Most appraisers organize their data in a systematic fashion by putting it all into a grid, a chart that compares the subject and comparables using identified elements of comparison. This makes it easy to see where differences lie and to make adjustments for those differences. The grid also helps ensure that you don't overlook any important differences or steps in your appraisal. Most residential appraisal report forms include some form of grid for appraisers to use. End of page. Chapter start. 12%. 12%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG52 sales grid. Notes print. Leave a comment. Sales grid. The Sales grid from the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, URAR, illustrates typical elements used in the sales comparison approach. We will discuss how to use the grid in detail later in this course. End of page. Chapter start. 12%. Residential sales comparison and income approaches. Help. Documents. Email instructor. CH2 sales data. PG 53 elements of comparison. Notes print. Leave a comment. Elements of comparison. The elements of comparison used in the sales comparison grid are features that support a sales price and typically explain variances in prices. The following 10 elements of comparison are the minimum suggested by the Appraisal Institute in their textbook, The Appraisal of Real Estate, 15th edition, Chicago, Illinois, 2020. Real property rights being conveyed, fee simple, easements, air rights, etc. Financing terms, favorable or not. Conditions of sale, arm's length or otherwise. Expenditures made immediately after purchase, things not included in age or condition adjustments that were necessary. Market conditions, time or date of sale. Location, neighborhood, waterfront, adjacent to school. Physical characteristics, quality, condition, size, special features. Economic characteristics, factors that affect a property's income. Use, zoning. Non-realty components of value, other influences on value. Each of the elements of comparison will be explained in much greater detail in subsequent chapters of this course. Many of these elements are broken down into subcomponents on the grid because they almost always require information, like age of home, exterior quality, interior quality, size, and so on. Keep your eyes open when preparing your grid for elements of comparison that might be outside the box. Perhaps new wetland legislation will prevent further development on a site. Or a new freeway is slated a few blocks away from the subject. Or a water shortage has recently resulted in a moratorium on future development. Factors like these must be noted as well, since they can have significant impacts on value. A handout addressing elements of comparison can be downloaded here. End of page. Chapter start. 12%.